Finally, a bed that senses snoring and automatically responds. Meet the Ergo Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic, our first system that detects snoring, then automatically adjusts by raising the bed. And now during the Tempur-Pedic Summer of Sleep, all Tempur-Pedic mattresses are on sale, with savings up to $500 on adjustable sets. Get your best sleep, all night, every night. Learn more at TempurPedic.com.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. During our lowest prices of the season, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 C2 Smart Bed is only $8.99. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 120 called Hannah. Today's episode is sponsored by VIOS Fertility Institute. You guys, I've had the pleasure of working with VIOS for Fertility Rally, and I cannot say enough good things about how much VIOS gets it when it comes to infertility, fertility, and the patient experience. VIOS is built on a foundation of patient-centered care, evidence-based medicine, and innovative technology. They have clinic locations throughout the country and patients from around the globe. And as a patient, you'll notice a difference from your very first phone call to the team celebration of your positive pregnancy test and everything in between. VIOS physicians are board certified and fellowship trained reproductive endocrinologists and infertility specialists. Many of them have also experienced fertility treatment or a struggle to build their own family firsthand. The VIOS Fertility Institute team works to create an individualized plan best suited for a patient's emotional, physical, and financial needs. I got to know VIOS first through their social media handle, and I'm super impressed by their commitment to the fertility community overall. Through Instagram, Facebook, their blog, and other social media, they offer great resources and credible fertility education. Check them out in all the social places at VIOS Fertility, and check out the blog on their website, viosfertility.com. To learn more about VIOS, to take advantage of that education and fertility information, or to schedule your first appointment, visit viosfertility.com. That's VIOSFERTILITY.com. Thanks, VIOS. Okay, guys, let me tell you about my amazing guest today. Her name is Hannah Johnson, and she is the Chief Strategy Officer at VIOS Fertility, and she's a mom of two. She has a really interesting story, what she calls a reverse infertility journey. And as you listen, you're going to understand what she means by that. But basically, she went from doing fertility treatments in the name of science as part of her job to actually going through a fertility journey of her own when she started to build her family. So you're going to hear about that, and we're going to touch on PCOS, the egg retrievals she did as part of her job, her miscarriage, and how she and her husband both processed that trauma, and so much more. So I love Hannah. She's super cool. She's become a good friend of mine, and I hope you enjoy. So without further ado, this is Hannah's infertility story. Hey, Hannah, it's so good to talk to you.
Hey, Allie, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for doing this. Did you always want to have kids? Are you one of those people that grew up always wanting to be a mom?
Yes, 100%.
What were you like growing up?
Yeah, I think my initial maternal instincts came when I became a big sister. So I'm a middle child between two boys. And I was 3 years old when my little brother Caleb was born. And he was, and I still believe, one of the greatest gifts to me in my life. He is my best friend. And I think at that age, being three, being a very verbal 3-year-old, I just dove into a caregiving role pretty immediately. I just absolutely loved being a big sister. I thought he was my baby.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah. So I think that experience sort of set the foundation of always knowing that I wanted to be a mom.
Okay. So let's fast forward a bunch. Did you guys talk about having kids right away? Or like, how did that play out in your relationship and how soon after you got together?
Yeah. So my husband and I have actually been together for almost 20 years. We met when we were pretty young. I was 16 and he was 20. And we got married when I was 24. And that was definitely a topic of conversation even early on in our relationship. We pretty much knew we were the ones for each other pretty early on. And so discussions like that happened pretty quickly. And my husband is an engineer, but in his free time, he's a hockey coach, a youth hockey coach.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. He's been coaching for over 15 years and absolutely loves it. And he's a phenomenal coach. So that was a pretty early indicator to me that I had nothing to worry about on the dad front. And then I've worked with kids as well, was a nanny, babysat a lot, and then I was an Irish dance teacher. So for us, we just always knew kids were going to be part of our life and we wanted them. But because we met so young and we got married young, we definitely gave ourselves some time to grow up a little bit and to just spend our time together childless before diving into becoming parents. But we've always known we wanted to be parents. And it's really definitely kind of core to who we are.
Yeah. It's so funny that you were 16 because I was 16 when I got together with my husband. We were high school sweethearts. Yeah. And it's so wild to think about 16. Like I felt so like grown up at the time. But now, like my daughter's 11, and to think that in 5 years she could meet her husband, like
yes,
it's so wild.
Completely feel you on that. I think about that all the time, especially now that I am a mom of daughters.
Right.
I can't imagine how my parents were able to kind of keep it together. But I think a lot of it was helped by the fact that my husband was always just so straightforward with them and kind, and they fell in love with him pretty quickly too. But it is a crazy thought to think that could be us
completely. So, okay, spoiler alert, you do have 2 girls, which is wonderful, but it was not an easy road to get there, correct?
It was not as easy as I'd hoped. And I think it's really funny considering I've worked in the infertility space my entire career. Like if anyone's intimately familiar with making their way to parenthood, it's certainly me. And so when it didn't go as planned, I think it surprised me in the sense that it was an eye-opener and a reality check for me. So not surprising that people don't get pregnant when they want to exactly, but more that it was an eye-opener to me that it can hit close to home. And even though I've seen it around me a million times, it was in some ways a good reminder and a good reality check to keep me honest and keep me thinking about our patients and what they go through every day.
Right. So, okay, let's talk about your career. Tell us exactly what you do and like when you started. And it's almost like a which came first, the chicken or the egg. Like, so you were in the field before you started to try to have kids?
Yes. So
okay.
I'm the chief strategy officer at VIOS, which means I have the most amazing, fun, incredible job. I really get to work with all of our different departments and all of our physicians on continuing to create a really great patient experience for our patients.
So awesome.
Yeah,
I'll interject and say we love VIOS. They're, we love Fertility Rally works with you guys on so many things, and you guys are just such great partners because it's a very strong female-founded company, which we love. And you were employee number 1, right?
I was, yeah. So I met our CEO, medical director, Dr. Angie Beltzos, when I was 20, and I started off infertility by doing an internship. I assisted with a phase 4 clinical trial, an FDA trial for a new medication, and spent the summer between my junior and senior year of college just diving into that. And I learned so much so fast because I was responsible for reviewing charts and looking at inclusion and exclusion criteria for this study. So I fell in love with fertility and never really looked back. I was planning to be an OBGYN. And once I met Angie and spent this time working with her and getting to know fertility, I realized that I loved fertility. It was really an interesting field of medicine because it was new and cutting edge, and it had clinical and laboratory and really interesting administrative pieces to the puzzle. So I really liked all of that together in this one space. And then I also found that I really enjoyed working with physicians and alongside them and supporting them. It was a big decision to decide not to go to med school. And I didn't know if it was going to be the right decision, but something in my heart told me, I wanted to stick with this amazing woman that I had met and see what fertility would do for me. And I'm so glad that I did that, because now I get to work with all these incredible physicians, these powerful, wonderful women. And I get to do something different every day. So that keeps me on my toes.
And it sounds like you've got kind of both sides of the coin, right? Like you do the kind of medical side, but also like the people side too. Like it's not it's kind of the best of both worlds, I would imagine.
Exactly.
You've got a cool job.
I do. I really think it's like the coolest job ever. And what I love about it is that I get to interact with all the different departments in VIOS. And I think one of the things about us is we are very self-aware. So we know we're not perfect. We've grown really, really quickly. And I think when you have a team that recognizes that and then embraces it and comes with solutions and ideas, and they're really enthusiastic, that's what continues to help you grow and be better. And so I get to do that on a big scale with our entire team, which has grown to almost 250 people across 5 states. So it's pretty awesome. Yes, I love my job. I could talk about that for the full 45 minutes.
Totally. So what did you learn, like before you started to try to have kids? Did you learn some things about fertility that you hadn't learned, like from sex ed or growing up?
Oh my gosh. Yes. And in fact, I continue to this day to lead a fertility 101 for all of our new employees. Now that we're so big, I'm trying to digitize that and make it a little more streamlined, but I've always enjoyed that. I do it on the first day that our employees start, because there is so much that we didn't learn in school. And so much of like sex ed is focused on preventing pregnancy and preventing the transmission of STIs, that there's so much lost in terms of understanding your body. And it's really heartbreaking, because I think that there are a lot of different decisions that women would make if they knew more about their bodies and they knew more about their cycles and red flags to look for, but that's just not something that's emphasized. So yeah, I absolutely learned so much about the entire process, starting with the menstrual cycle, which I think is the most important foundation to understanding your fertility and understanding what things look like for you. And so I think that it was definitely an eye-opening dive into this field of medicine, because not only was I learning a lot about medicine and about infertility as a medical specialty, but I was learning so much about myself and recognizing things that I hadn't really paid attention to or made note of in the past. So absolutely, it was an eye-opener.
What were a couple of the examples, if you don't mind, or either about yourself or even just in general, like that you learned that you didn't know before?
One of the big things for me was I was really surprised that male factor infertility was equally as prevalent as female factor. And I think it's because the female experience is so in your face when it comes to infertility. If you have male factor infertility, you still have to do a lot of treatment on the woman. So to learn that was equivalent was really surprising to me. And I think another one of the things that was surprising to me, or something that I was glad I learned early on, was that I think a lot of young women are taught that irregular cycles are not that big of a deal, or having really heavy cycles are not that big of a deal when you're younger. And then so many girls are put on birth control pretty young to help manage some of those things. And I think learning about why those are happening and why irregular cycles are not normal was a very important part of my journey in understanding how I would become a mom, because I did have really heavy cycles. I did have irregular cycles that really pointed towards potential PCOS. And I'm glad I knew that earlier, and I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't been in this field.
Yeah, it's so incredible how many women I talk to, I would say in the 90% range, that were like, oh yeah, I was put on the pill at, 15 or 14 or even earlier. And that masked so many things that were going on with them, and I'm so happy that people like you are out there educating, this next generation and like our daughters, because I feel like they're going to be more in control and armed better with better information. Because you're right. I've said this 100 million times. So sorry to the listeners who've heard this, but all we were taught was like, don't get pregnant. It's so easy to get pregnant. That's it. End of story. And it pisses me off actually, because there's so much more to it than that. And I think so many of us could have avoided heartbreak had we known.
It makes me so angry. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is just talking about what I do and opening up conversations. My husband and I joke before holiday parties or weddings, there's almost always somebody who corners me at any event that we go to talk about what they're going through. So sometimes we even take a bet on who we think it might be. It's so prevalent. And I think the more we can talk about it, the better, because that whole, I usually use the Mean Girls quote when I'm doing my fertility 101, like, if you get pregnant, you'll die.
Yeah.
And if you get an STI, you'll die. And I think that mentality has just completely flooded everyone's brain, that they have not had an opportunity to make real, truly informed decisions about their health. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and I really hope that I see this in my lifetime, is that we start talking about fertility as part of routine OBGYN care and not just waiting till it gets to a specialist. Because I think that if young women, even if just one time, and I understand it wouldn't be realistic to do this at every annual appointment, but I think if even just one time in your early 20s, if you were able to have a simple fertility assessment, look at FSH, estradiol, AMH, and maybe do an antral follicle count ultrasound, that would open up so much of a world of knowledge for young women to make a decision, to see if maybe they have a diminished ovarian reserve, or they have a really, really high AMH, and maybe they have PCOS. There's so many things we could learn from just a handful of tests that I hope someday I see that that's part of our routine care for young women, so that they can make better decisions about their family building and really figure out what their path and their plan is going to be.
Mm-hmm. I know. I keep envisioning a world where we're like a bunch of us band together and do like a school tour and like go around and like speak to schools. Like, can we do that?
Yes. I am so in. I love it.
Because I'm always like, I want to make a change, but like, it's like, who's going to make it? We got to get out there and do it. Yes. I just think it would be so awesome. Have like assemblies or something just for young women, and just to let them know, like, they've got the power, it doesn't have to be a scared straight like situation.
Exactly. And honestly, the more you know about yourself and your body, the more likely you are to the right decisions when it comes to preventing pregnancy and then attempting pregnancy. So it's a win-win situation, I think. One of our two physicians, Dr. Amber Cooper and Dr. Julie Ree, who started our VIOS St. Louis location, they actually, in our early days, had to haul an ultrasound machine in their minivan from one location to another. So why don't we just grab a minivan and an ultrasound too while we're at it?
Let's go on tour.
Assemblies.
I'm not kidding. I'm dead serious that I would do something like this. I would love that. That would be so meaningful.
Okay,
we'll talk later about it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. So anyway, it's just so awesome what you guys are doing. Let's get back to your story though. So, okay, tell me what happened when you guys started to try.
Yeah. So I have a weird little interlude to my story, in that I've been through 2 egg retrievals. And a lot of people don't know that, because I did not have to use my embryos to get pregnant with my 2 daughters. And the reason that I went through 2 retrievals was because I am a lover of science. And we had a debate within my old clinic about whether or not it was appropriate to allow egg donors to keep in long-form types of birth control. So like a Mirena IUD or Implanon, ones that were hormonal. And there was a bit of a debate amongst the physicians, and both within our clinic and just the community, about whether or not there was an impact on cycles by using those birth control methods. And some physicians felt like the dose was so low that the medications being used would totally overpower any sort of birth control effort there. And then other physicians felt like there could be, a harmful impact. And when we're talking about egg donor cycles, these are really big investments for the intended parents. And so it's important to make sure that everything we're doing is perfect for them. And so I kind of jokingly raised my hand and said, I'm young, I'm an egg donor type person at this time. I was in my early 20s, and I had an Implanon, which was a long form type of birth control. It's a 5-year birth control implant that you put in your arm.
What is it called?
Implanon. It might be Nexplanon now. They all change names and stuff, but it's a little rod that they insert in your arm. And so I said, well, I'm young and I'm, theoretically a good prognosis, egg donor type patient and I have this. So why don't you guys stimulate me and see what happens? And so, it wasn't a highly scientific case match type study. It was just, just a single person, just me. But it was an opportunity to see what was going to happen. And my cycle was absolutely wild and crazy. I think my antral follicle count at baseline was somewhere around 35, and my follicles grew really well, and my estradiol never ever made it above 1,000, which was just completely unexpected for
what
the
is
amount
it
of
supposed
follicles.
to be?
So generally speaking, when you've got a mature follicle, like usually people say back of the napkin, you're looking at about 200 units of estradiol. So with me having as many mature follicles I had, we would definitely have expected me to be somewhere probably in like the 3,000 range. And I didn't even make it over 1,000. So that was just weird and alarming in and of itself. But I went through the whole process, and I had an egg retrieval and made embryos. And then the physician said, you know what, we don't really need to do more. This was good enough for us. We agree. Let's not let our donors use these types of birth control. We'll have them removed before they stimulate. The whole reason behind this was that we didn't want to inconvenience egg donors by making them remove these long form types of birth control and then have to go back in and have them placed again after they donated. But my cycle was wacky enough to convince the physicians who were on the fence that it just probably wasn't worth the risk, just in case there was an impact. And so I had these embryos, and then it was a couple years. And
how many embryos did you have? And also, I love that you did this in like the name of science. Like you're like, I'll do it to help the greater good. Like that's so cool.
That's totally who I am. And like, this is so interesting. I'm a good candidate, and I'm internal. This would never be something that would be researched, of course, because you'd have to pay to have people go through IVF and have this birth control in and then match it to people who don't. And it wouldn't be a study that would be worth funding for most companies. So this is something that just would never really get studied. So I was happy to do it. And I ended up with four normal embryos. And that was actually over 2 cycles. So, so my first cycle, it really didn't go as well as I would have thought. I think I was 24 at the time. And, it resulted in, I had a low fertilization rate, and then I had a low blast rate. So I only ended up with, I think, 5 blasts that first cycle, and 2 of them were normal. We did PGT testing. We really did the whole 9 yards to get a good look at this. And so I was disappointed because I was expecting more. And that was probably my first foray into kind of adjusting expectations. But what I think the most important thing about that cycle was an absolutely totally intense appreciation for what all of the women had gone through that I had been working with. As much as I tried to empathize with my patients that I worked with, it was not the same as receiving that large box of medication in the mail and having to sort it and having to administer the meds myself. I think you can never go back. Once you've gone through it, you have a different appreciation that you can't have if you haven't gone through it yourself.
So true.
And I was young, and I was really doing this more in the name of science and to help patients down the line. But I learned so much about myself and about the emotions that my patients experience and what they were feeling, and and the disappointment that comes with having numbers that are lower than you expect. So those embryos, they were there, and then a few years later, it was time to start trying, and I got pregnant, and it was not a good pregnancy. I miscarried my first pregnancy, and that was also a very eye-opening experience. All of the things I'd ever thought in my head, and I was smart enough to never say them, but the things that we often say to ourselves behind the scenes in fertility that are just now in hindsight just so awful. Things like, well, we're just glad this patient got pregnant. That's a good thing. That's a good sign. We should be able to get them pregnant again. It wasn't that far along. I mean, these aren't things that we say, but we think them, as providers, like, okay, it's better to get someone pregnant than to never get them pregnant, because then there's so much more of an unknown. But then having been pregnant and losing that pregnancy, all of those little catchphrases that we think behind the scenes, they were just so profoundly terrible.
Triggering.
Yeah. And again, a new layer of appreciation for what all of these women had gone through before me. And what I didn't know about miscarriage was how long the effect would be. So I'm definitely a type A. I'm an Enneagram 3, Myers-Briggs ENTJ. So I'm an extrovert. I am process oriented and goal oriented. And to me, I thought, well, gosh, I work in this field. I have helped so many women through their miscarriages in my experiences and my roles in fertility. I have friends who've gone through it, who I've supported, and yet here I was not coping with it very well at all. And I would say it probably took me almost a year to really, really quote unquote, get over it, which was very surprising to me. It was a far more traumatic experience than I could have anticipated, even having been around so many women that had been through it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think that was the biggest surprise for me was, first of all, I'm not invincible and I do have feelings, and that everyone around me who was trying their hardest to do what I had done for so many people, I just learned a lot about being a supportive friend or partner, and things to say, things not to say. And that also sometimes you just have to let time pass. You can't force your way through it. You can't get over it without the proper amount of time and processing, which for some people is very short and some people is very long. And I think I just thought,
and you never know.
Yeah. I thought I would be like, okay, let's get over it. Let's move on. Let's try again and we'll be fine.
Right. So where did you turn for support during that time, and how did it affect your husband as well?
Yeah. So I was going on a trip with my mom. I was taking her on a trip for her birthday. I think it was for her 60th. And we were going to Hawaii. And so I found out I was pregnant. And one of the things I didn't know about getting pregnant, of course, because I'd not been pregnant before, was that when you get pregnant, like the moment you're pregnant, your entire life changes. You are immediately a mom. So no matter whether or not somebody who's listening right now has a baby in their arms right now, if they're still on their journey, I totally see you and I feel you if you've been in that place, even just for a brief moment in time, that you are a mom, and in an instant you have these plans and you're thinking about how old they're going to be at this time. And it's just, that was so surprising to me, like this rush of this life that was going to unfold. And so I found out I was pregnant. I knew I was going to be with my mom shortly. And I had this, whole plan to tell her about becoming pregnant. And I was so excited. We were going to be at the top of Mauna Kea on the Big Island. And I was going to tell her she was going to be a grandma. And I was really excited. And then that didn't happen. So I miscarried before we went on our trip. And I had to I had to figure out, did I want to tell my mom before we went on the trip so that she could kind of process a little bit and we could enjoy it? Or did I want to tell her while we were there? Because my mom is one of my closest, people. And so I wanted her there. And my mom, it turns out, was the kind of miscarriage guru in her life for many of the women that she taught with. My mom was a teacher for her whole life, and she had several losses herself. And when women in school would miscarry, they kind of all heard, well, you should go talk to Krista. She's an amazing person. I could talk about her forever, but having been through it and being sort of that maternal instinct, and as she was a teacher longer and longer, becoming more and more of that mom figure for many younger teachers, she had helped a lot of women through this. So I decided to tell her before we went on our trip. And then I was so glad I had, because we got to Hawaii and we were staying with some friends who I absolutely adore, and are my oldest daughter's godparents. And they had to tell us that they were very early pregnant. And I could see how hard it was for my friend Emily, because she knew what I had gone through because I had told her. And she also knew she had to tell me. And I was so glad to have my mom there, because I did not probably process that as quickly and easily as I would have hoped, because of course I was so excited for my friends. But having my mom was really, really helpful. Several of my friends, being in fertility this long, most of my really good friends now that are local to Chicago are because of my work. So they were wonderful, especially my dear friend Fran. She helped me from start to finish, she's just an incredible person. And I am forever indebted to her for how she helped me through all of that. And then there was my husband. But I have to say, I think this was the first really traumatic event that my husband and I experienced together.
Yeah.
And I think he, like so many men before him, and will continue into the future, and any partner, frankly, who's not experiencing it, as the partner, you just feel so helpless.
Right.
And there's nothing you can really do. And you can't make it better, and you can't fix it. And I think that generally speaking, as partners in life, you always want to help fix whatever is going on with your partner. And this is an unfixable. So that was a challenge for us. And I think that for him, it was such a brief moment in time. I miscarried like at 6 weeks. So very early. For so many people who aren't the pregnant person, you just don't have that connection yet. So I think for him, it was probably surprising how long it took for me to get over it, because he didn't have that immediate sense of connection that I felt when I found out I was pregnant. And I think that that's something that I always tell partners who have someone going through this, that, you're going to have this sense of wanting to fix it. And you also may not understand the time frame, because you might not have really felt that intense connection yet. And that's okay. The best thing you can do is just to talk about it, to just name those feelings, or just talk to each other about how you're sort of in a different place, so that you can walk through it together. Because I think what people want is they want their partner to be on the same exact page. And that's just unrealistic.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, it's true.
Your AC works overtime all summer, so be sure to replace your old air filters with new Filtry air filters. They recommend updating HVAC filters at least every 3 months all year round. So order your Filtry air filters today at Filtry.com. Let's clear the air.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. During our lowest prices of the season, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 C2 Smart Bed is only $8.99. Only for limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
Yeah, so that was my support group. And then I didn't really tell people, Allie, and I carried a lot of guilt for that for a really long time, that I was in the infertility community. I was such a vocal advocate for people. I was, helping other people through this, and yet had this sense of maybe shame and guilt that so many people have when they miscarry. And I didn't share my story. And I finally shared my story publicly. I wrote a blog post about it on my very non-existent blog. But I wrote about my miscarriage, and it was during the Infant Loss and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month, the year that Charlie was born. And I shared my story then. So it took me like 3 years to share.
Why do you think it took so long?
I don't know. And I am still baffled by it, because I'm usually such an open book, and especially if my story can help other people. And it took me just this, I don't know. I think I finally felt like I need to share this, because if it's going to help one person, then it will have been worth it. And then the funniest thing happened was I posted that, and I put it up on my Facebook and my Instagram. And a few hours later, I got a text from a number that wasn't in my phone. And it was a friend of mine who'd gotten a new phone. And she texted me that she was sitting in her OBGYN office to go in to see if her miscarriage was complete. And I didn't know she was pregnant at the time. And she said that my post had completely transformed her day. And it really helped her. And she sent it to her husband, because I talked a little bit in there about how partners can be supportive.
Right.
And I thought, oh my gosh, Hannah, why did you wait so long? I mean, on the day I posted it, somebody felt a little bit better.
You changed somebody's life.
Yeah. If one
That's
person
so cool.
feels a little better and feels a little less alone, then it's worth it. So now I always share about it. And I think, it's just so common. So many people will miscarry during their journey to becoming a parent, whether their first pregnancy or in between babies, or sometimes many, many times along the way. And I'm just really glad that I feel comfortable talking about it because it just helps so much to know when people around you have gone through it and that you're not alone.
Yeah. And I want to clarify too, like obviously that's why I shared my story too and started this podcast. But, if anybody's listening and doesn't want to share, that's okay too. It's like, you have to be ready. You have to do what's right for you.
You have to be ready. Yeah.
So I get it that you felt in retrospect, you're like, I should have, but you weren't ready yet. And that's okay.
I wasn't. Yeah.
Think of all the change you've done since then. It's almost like tenfold or hundreds fold, like all the people that you're helping. So
yeah. And people may never feel comfortable sharing, but I'm glad to know that they at least will have resources to read or listen to, like this podcast, that will help them feel less alone. Even if they want to keep that story private to themselves, they can. Totally. There's so many more resources now, so many more people that talk about this than even when I first miscarried, which was, I think, 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. So in 6 years, I've just seen in the 13 years I've been in fertility, there's been so much change in terms of sharing and openness and resources and support groups. It's just incredible. It blows my mind. And I'm so happy to know that this next generation of patients who are, infertility patients or people just trying to conceive, that they have more support and resources and people and, blogs and podcasts to listen to and read.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's at Fertility Rally with our support groups too, along those same lines. We're like, you don't have to talk. You can just come. You don't even have to turn your camera on. Like if you just want to be here in the safe space, like I think everybody's at such different points in their journeys. So I agree with you. I
have to say, I just have to interject. And Allie did not ask me to say anything about this, you guys, but I have been to some of your support groups, as you know, with the VIOS team. And I am so impressed by what you've built. Infertility support groups are incredibly challenging. And it's very difficult to create a space that has equivalencies, because you might have somebody who's going to go through their first IUI, and then you might have somebody who's finishing their last IVF round before donor egg. And those experiences are really different and yet the same. And so to try to find those ribbons that weave everyone together, but being sensitive to the very different type of journey someone might be on, I think is what makes it hard for so many support groups to thrive and survive. And because when people get pregnant, then they tend to want to kind of leave the community. Yeah. And what you have built is just, it's really, really amazing. And I had so much fun coming to the group and seeing everybody and how everyone knew each other and connected. And I just think that you built something really special, because I have sat in on a lot of support groups and been a part of a lot of different things. And what you have is it's like a secret sauce. There's something special there.
Oh my God. That's so nice. I will Venmo you after this. No, honestly, thank you. That really means the world. Yeah, and, I think it's, we have to give credit to Blair, my co-founder as well. I think she and I just have this common goal that we just, we've been through hell. We want to make it better. And, maybe there's something there between the two of us, but I really appreciate that. Thank you for saying that.
True. You're achieving that goal. And I think if anyone is looking for that kind of support, what you offer is just so perfect.
Thank you.
Especially now that we're all so used to virtual life.
I know. So. I know. All right. Well, let's get back to you. Enough about me, but thank you. Honestly, that really, really means the world to me.
Well, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Truly.
Thank you. Okay. So what happened after the miscarriage?
So I took a long time to heal. It did not, my first instinct was not to jump back into trying to conceive. I was not psychologically ready for that. And then my whole world kind of changed. So I had this miscarriage, and then there was an opportunity to help Dr. Beltzos start VIOS. And I kind of felt like I was in a place in my career, my life, where I needed something more. I needed something more dynamic. And so I left my previous clinic for an opportunity that didn't pan out to be what I wanted it to be, and then reconnected with Angie. And so I had a very short moment out of fertility, a few weeks, and then it was time to start VIOS. And so in the summer of 2015, we had this idea, and it's so funny to think about it. I always tell our employees, especially recently, Like we look like this kind of, big established network. And we've got all these doctors and these locations, which we do, of course. And we are so fortunate to help so many patients achieve their dreams. But just a few years ago, it was an idea at a kitchen table. I literally started my job with VIOS working at Dr. Belzos's kitchen table.
I love
because
it.
we didn't have any locations.
Right.
And so we started in St. Louis. And so there was this opportunity for me that was life-changing. I was the employee number one, and I got to help get things up and running. We started in St. Louis, then we came to Chicago, then Milwaukee. Now we've got Portland and Detroit this year. So it was so interesting. It always is how life turns out. But I don't know if I could have dove in to this new opportunity. And I don't know if I could have done this whole startup lifestyle had my pregnancy been successful. And so I dove into my work, and it was exactly what I always wanted to do with my life. Like it really turned out to be an absolute dream come true. And then I got pregnant. I didn't want to get pregnant while we were really getting going because there's just a lot to do. And so I worked for a year. And so about a year and a half after my miscarriage, I got pregnant with my daughter, Charlie, and was very surprised that I got pregnant as easily as I did with her because of my irregular cycles and PCOS, and just wasn't sure how that was going to work out.
Right. So you were diagnosed with PCOS along the way, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how it goes when you work at a fertility clinic. You have, you get opportunities to test and talk to doctors. So that was great.
Okay.
And so I had that knowledge and was prepared, if I needed more intervention, and especially after my my stimulation cycle, it was good to kind of see how things went. And by the way, I missed it. Another part of the puzzle was after I had my birth control removed, we did a second retrieval after my miscarriage because Dr. Belzos felt that, based on my first cycle and then having miscarried, that it's better to be proactive and have a plan. And because I have access to those resources and I had insurance coverage, I was able to do another retrieval and only ended up getting another 2 normal embryos. So being in my mid-20s and doing 2 retrievals, I only ended up with 4 normal embryos, which is not fantastic. And I'm really glad that I did it because we just didn't know how my fertility would progress. And again, here's that message of if only we knew more about ourselves. Right. I'm in a very privileged position to have access to these incredible physicians and resources and the ability to go through these treatments because I had insurance. And so many people don't have that. And they oftentimes don't find out till it's way later. So I feel very thankful for that. So I had those embryos. And then shortly after I got pregnant with Charlie, and that was an incredibly healing experience for me from start to finish. Again, it took me about a year to get over, to really feel like I'd processed,
Right.
You ever really get over it, but I feel like I had processed it. And then, and then I got pregnant with her and it felt like everything was the way it was supposed to be. And it felt like that, my initial pregnancy and that baby in many ways gave me this gift of a new life. I learned a lot about myself and how I do and don't process emotions and experiences and trauma. And I also was given this amazing career opportunity that I'm just not sure I would have been able to take and dive into the way I did had things worked out differently. And so it was kind of this full circle experience to get pregnant with Charlie.
Yeah.
And I never actually felt any worry when I was pregnant with her.
Did you have, pregnancy after loss, pregnancy after infertility? We talk about that a lot. Did you have that anxiety that comes along with that?
No. And I was really shocked, like truly shocked. I thought I would be a mess and like the whole pregnancy I'd be on pins and needles. And yet I just had this really strong sense of healing and feeling complete, and that this pregnancy was going to be okay. And I was very positive, very optimistic. And, she healed me in that sense in terms of this pregnancy really allowed me to move forward and feel that positivity. And then when I had her, there was another layer, I think, of of healing that she brought to me as a person who needed to learn more patience and probably more empathy, and a lot of the things that you get as a parent. I really credit her for bringing me to a really new part of my life, and as a different person. And particularly in that and this was probably anxiety manifesting as rage, but before I had her, I would have these like really frustrated moments, and I would, clench my jaw on my fist, and I get really frustrated and almost have this like seething rage inside. And that went away when I had her. And I don't know. I probably put too much pressure on her if I tell her this story when she's older, that I really feel like she healed some parts of me, but she did. And I think it's all woven together with the experience of having a loss and then figuring out when do you try again. And then there's also this real intense sense of guilt that I ever felt a little relieved about the loss. And I think that's one of the things that never gets talked about, that sometimes when you miscarry, there is a sense of relief for whatever reason, multitude of reasons. And for me, looking back on it, I thought, my life has turned out to be my wildest dream. And some of it was because of that. And I felt really, really terrible feeling those feelings. But then when I got pregnant with Charlie, I realized that it was all meant to be. That Charlie was meant to be my first live baby here on earth. And it was all part of kind of the journey and the plan.
It's so true. And Whitney Port just popped into my mind, who I'd interviewed last year. And she said something about having kind of a sense of relief with a miscarriage as well. And a couple of other people on Instagram I've seen mention that, but it doesn't get talked about a lot. And I think that it's okay to feel that way. Like, as women, we're trained that that's to feel guilty about that, or that that's bad, but I think it's okay. And I think by you saying that just now, it's making it even more okay. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I think especially people who are going through an infertility journey, when they feel that feeling, it is a very confusing feeling. And I think it's probably even doubly guilt inducing. So yeah, I'm here to say, if you have that feeling, it might be confusing, but it doesn't mean that you're bad or you're wrong. Right. Just the feeling that you're feeling, and all feelings that you feel are valid are meant to be felt.
Totally. So, I love that. So between Charlie, is Charlie short for something, or is it Charlie?
It's short for Charlotte, but the only people who call her that are her grandparents.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. And okay, so then baby number 2, did you have any losses between the two of them?
I didn't. So I went back.
Because you just had your second baby.
I did. Right? Yes. Yes. Willa is 8 weeks old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. She's
and they're all like mini Hannahs. You sent me a picture, and your dad, right? Like the generation, the genes are strong. They're so cute.
Gary Johnson's genes are very strong. I'm
Gary Johnson, him. Give it up.
Yes. I'm a mini him, and they're a mini me. They look like clones of each other. It's
so
wild.
Cute.
Thank you. So so in between, I did not have any losses. We wanted to have a little bit of separation between our kids. That was our plan. Some people like to have them close together, and some people want to have them spread out. And if you're lucky enough to even try to plan that. So for us, we knew we wanted a couple of years, at least in between. And then, life just sneaks up on you. And I had birth control, and then I had it removed, and I didn't get pregnant. It wasn't really like a, we're not trying kind of thing. It was just more, I had it out. I was tired of being on birth control. I also have, I'm heterozygous for prothrombin thrombophilia, which is a genetic clotting thing. And so, Dr. Beltzos and my OB practice, they, kind of felt comfortable if I just went off of hormonal birth control because of the increased risk of clots. So I went off of it, didn't get pregnant, but wasn't really actively trying. And then COVID hit right after Charlie turned 3. And that was obviously a very challenging time last spring. We're still living in a challenging time, but I just panicked. I didn't know what do we do? Do we now wait even more? Because at that point I thought, if I don't get pregnant soon, Charlie's going to be well over 4 years old. And I never really intended for a 4-year age gap. I kind of always thought it would be closer to 3, but I hadn't gotten pregnant. And so we decided to start trying again. And it did not come as easily as it the first time did. And I decided that despite COVID, I felt like I was working from home mostly. And I felt like, if I'm going to be pregnant during a global pandemic, I could figure out how to keep myself safe, considering I had, the option to work from home for a while. So we decided to go ahead and try. And I didn't want COVID to be the reason that things didn't work out the way we wanted it to.
Right.
If we could try. So it was a hard decision because there's so much unknown, but we decided to go ahead. And in the back of my mind, I thought, well, if we start trying now, it might not happen right away. So, it may be well into this pandemic. And so I didn't get pregnant. And that was my first. So I feel like I've had all these different interesting experiences along the fertility spectrum of having retrievals, having a miscarriage, finally getting pregnant. And then this was my first time where I was trying to get pregnant and then seeing those negative tests. And again, I'm thankful for that experience because it provides me an opportunity to be even more empathetic to the patients that we work with. As much as I, never want people to go through that, I think it's very eye-opening. And a lot of my friends who know that I work in fertility, who have tried for 6 or 7 months and then get pregnant, they say, oh my gosh, I have such a better appreciation for infertility patients because those 6 or 7 months was really hard, even though that's not the definition of infertility for people who are under 35, you got to try for a year. I think that we live in such a time where we want that immediate gratification. So it feels confusing. And again, a lot of people don't know their bodies that well. So they might not be doing the best job of trying. So I didn't get pregnant. And then I decided, with my history being, 4 years older now and having PCOS, that I would go ahead and try some oral medications to see if that would help. And it did. I took letrozole and that helped immensely. And it's a great option for a lot of patients who,
good to know.
Who may be starting out in their infertility journey. So I took letrozole and I didn't end up needing a trigger shot because I surged on my own, and that helped me get my Willa. So that was also a fairly uneventful pregnancy. And now I'm a mom of 2 who's been through kind of like a reverse infertility journey.
Right. Interesting.
Starting with retrievals and ending, but I'm really thankful to have had each and every one of those experiences, because working in this field, it is so important to understand our patients. Not that I want our employees to have to go through infertility,
but so many of you guys have too at VIOS. Ruby's going through it.
Ruby's going through right now, and there's just something different about working with somebody who can say, I've been there. After I had my miscarriage and I worked with patients who had miscarried, there's just a different, when I tell someone I'm sorry and I've been there and I understand what you're going through.
Instant bond.
It's just different. So
the empathy level is just exponentially bigger.
Yeah. Even when you thought you were at, a high level,
right.
It's really helpful. And I think it was helpful for me because I am a very, I'm a very direct person, and I am a type A person. I'm a business person. And I have to look at both sides of infertility, the patient experience. I have to look at the employee experience. I have to look at it as both a business and a medical service. And so having those extra experiences to make sure that I keep my empathy in check, I think is actually really, really helpful and important. Just knowing myself, and to make sure that I'm reminded of that, and that I keep always thinking about the patient. That's my number one priority. And what can we do to make their experience better? What can we do to make them get pregnant faster? So going through these experiences myself really help keep that focus and make sure that I always have my eyes on that prize.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening. And Hannah, thank you so much for all that you do in this community and as part of your job, and for just being an awesome person in general. I really, really hope that we can go on the road with our sex education tour. I really mean that. So let's talk about that, putting it out into the universe so that we can make that happen eventually. Also, guys, I know we talked a bit about Fertility Rally, and I'm so touched by what Hannah said about it. But if you are interested and you're looking for support, please check us out at fertilityrally.com or on Instagram at fertilityrally. We have support groups. We have 2 support groups every week. One's for pregnancy after infertility, and one is for regular infertility. And we have so many curated events, lots of content, and tons of other things. So it's the place I wish I had when I was going through it. We would love for you to join us. All right. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next time.
Worried about mom or dad falling? The Symphony Medical Alert System from CVS Health helps make their home safer, even if you can't be there. Symphony works with voice activation or a care button they can opt to wear, along with smart sensors for coverage around the home. With 24/7 emergency response and an app to tie it all together, you can monitor your loved one's well-being for enhanced peace of mind. Terms and conditions apply. Learn more about Symphony at cvs.com/symphony or find it at your nearest CVS Health Hub.
Your AC works overtime all summer, so be sure to replace your old air filters with new Filtry air filters. They recommend updating HVAC filters at least every 3 months all year round. So order your Filtry air filters today at Filtry.com. Let's clear the air.